The bell above the door jingled again, soft and familiar. But this time it carried a weight that Emma couldn't ignore. She looked up from arranging a stack of second-hand novels, forcing a polite smile as she wiped her hands on her apron. The morning sunlight streamed through the large glass panes of willow and ivy, her little corner bookstore tucked on the edge of Maple Street, and illuminated the dust motes swirling lazily in the air. The scent of old paper mixed with the faint aroma of coffee from the small espresso machine behind the counter, creating a comforting, homey warmth. But today something felt off. He stepped in slowly, deliberately, as if the store itself weren't quite real. His shoes gleamed against the hardwood floor, perfectly polished leather, a contrast to the worn rug at the entrance. His suit was charcoal gray, cut with the precision of a master tailor, and the cufflinks glinted subtly with each movement. A leather briefcase hung from his hand, and there was a quiet authority in his posture that made Emma's heart skip a beat. She tried to shake off the strange flutter in her chest. "Good morning," she said, her voice soft but professional. "Can I help you find anything?" The man's eyes, a stormy blue-gray, lifted to meet hers. They held a clarity, a focus, as if he had studied her just as much as she had instinctively studied him. "No, thank you. Just browsing," he said, his voice calm, measured, like someone used to small talk. Emma returned to her task of organizing a pile of romance novels, her mind unwillingly drawn to the stranger. There was something familiar about him, a quiet presence that tugged at a memory she couldn't quite place. She shook her head and focused on the books, telling herself that a stranger in a bookstore wasn't unusual. But then, she caught a faint glimmer of something in his briefcase. A small photograph peeking out from the edge. Her fingers froze around the spine of a novel. The photograph was subtle, partially hidden, but even in a glimpse, she recognized it. Her mother. The woman in the photo smiled warmly, her hair catching the sunlight just like Emma remembered from childhood pictures. She was wearing a floral dress, the same pattern Emma had seen in old faded photos on the mantel at home. Her chest tightened. Her mother had died when Emma was 7, leaving behind a trail of questions she had never been able to answer. Who her father was, why he had disappeared, whether she had any family left in the world. Emma's heart hammered, but she forced herself to continue her work, pretending nothing had happened. She poured a cup of black coffee and set it carefully on the counter. "Here you go," she said, her voice almost a whisper, as if speaking louder would shatter the fragile moment. He took the cup slowly, as if savoring it more than the flavor. When his fingers brushed the photo sticking out of the briefcase again, his color drained slightly. "You?" he began, but stopped, his voice faltering. "Where did you get that?" Emma's mind spun. She hadn't shown him anything. I don't know what you mean," she stammered, trying to keep her hands steady. "It's just, The bell rang again as another customer entered, breaking the intensity of the moment. He nodded slightly to acknowledge the newcomer but didn't leave. Emma's thoughts were racing. Who was he? And why did her mother's photo end up with this perfect stranger in a tailored suit? After the store quieted again, he approached the counter to pay for his coffee. He placed a folded stack of bills on the countertop, but paused mid-motion. His eyes searched hers, as if seeking permission to speak. "Do you have a name?" Emma blinked, caught off guard. "Emma Carter," she replied cautiously, her voice almost drowned by the quiet hum of the store. He froze, an unreadable expression crossing his face. "Emma Carter. Your mother's name wasn't Miller?" Emma's breath caught. "It was. How do you?" Before she could finish, he nodded toward the photo, and for a brief moment, their shared recognition hung in the air like a fragile thread. He thanked her quietly and left the store, stepping into the sunlight that reflected off his polished shoes. Emma's hands shook slightly as she picked up the black leather envelope he had left behind on the counter. She opened it with tentative fingers. Inside was a handwritten letter in flowing script, words she hadn't seen in years. "Emma, if you are reading this, it means I failed to find you sooner. There is someone who needs to see you, to know you, and I am too late to tell you myself. Please meet him. Find him. His name is Michael Anderson. Tell him I sent you." Emma sank into the chair behind the counter, holding the letter like a fragile relic. Michael Anderson. The name resonated with distant echoes from her mother's past. Her mother had never spoken of him. She had always been careful not to reveal too much, even when Emma asked about her father. And now, after all these years, this man was reaching out. Her mind wandered back to childhood memories. The faint scent of jasmine from her mother's perfume, evenings spent reading by the window, the warmth of her mother's hand holding hers during thunderstorms. All the questions that had haunted her life for nearly 2 decades surged forward. Who was Michael Anderson? Why had he disappeared? And most importantly, did he know about her? Emma's younger brother, Noah, burst into the store at that moment, waving a crumpled flyer in the air. "Emma, Mom's old neighbor left these for the kids' summer camp program. Look." He was oblivious to her turmoil, the innocence of youth shielding him from the weight of history she carried alone. Emma forced a smile and tucked the letter into her apron pocket. "Thanks, Noah. We'll check it out in a minute," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. She watched him scamper off, the day stretching ahead like a canvas waiting to be painted. Hours passed. Emma couldn't focus on restocking books or shelving new arrivals. Her mind kept drifting back to Michael Anderson. Who was he? Did he remember her mother as vividly as she did? And why now? Why had he waited so long to reach out? As the sun began to dip behind the buildings across the street, Emma made a decision. She couldn't ignore the letter. She had spent too long living in fragments, piecing together a life from memories and faded photographs. If Michael Anderson was real, if he was connected to her mother, she had to know. She closed the store early, a rare act of rebellion against routine, and sat in her car, clutching the letter. The world outside was painted in shades of orange and gold, the city alive with evening traffic, laughter spilling from cafes, the distant hum of life carrying on unaware of the secrets hidden in quiet corners. Her heart raced with anticipation, fear, and a flicker of hope she hadn't felt since childhood. This was more than a meeting, it was the possibility of answers, a family, of belonging. She took a deep breath, straightened her shoulders, and whispered to herself, "It's time to find him." And with that, the journey began. The morning air was crisp when Emma stepped out of her small apartment, the letter from Michael Anderson folded carefully in her coat pocket. She walked briskly down Maple Street, the familiar rhythm of her boots on the pavement grounding her, though her mind raced with questions she didn't yet know how to ask. Each step carried both excitement and fear, the strange duality of hope tempered by years of disappointment. She paused at the corner cafe, a place her mother had loved to frequent. The scent of roasted coffee beans and warm pastries brought back memories she had almost buried. Her mother smiling at the barista, laughing at a joke she couldn't remember, her hand resting on Emma's shoulder with that soft, comforting warmth. Emma took a deep breath and ordered a cup of black coffee, letting the familiar ritual calm her jittering nerves. Sitting by the window, she unfolded the letter once more. Michael Anderson. The name alone carried weight, though she had no idea whether it was the same Michael she had heard about in whispered stories or newspaper mentions. The letter was brief, yet it held a promise, a tether to the past that she had long thought lost. Emma opened her laptop and began searching. She typed in Michael Anderson, New York businessman first, then tried combinations with finance, real estate, and philanthropy. Each search result brought a different version of a man she didn't recognize, and yet something in the photos, stern blue eyes, a subtle smile, made her pause. But none of them were conclusive. Hours passed. The morning sun had climbed high into the sky, casting golden light into her small apartment. Emma's coffee had grown cold, and her fingers ached from scrolling and typing. And then, a small clue appeared. A press release about a Michael Anderson Foundation opening a scholarship program for children who had lost parents. Emma's heart skipped. Could it be him? Could it really be the same man her mother had once loved? The one who might have been her father? She jotted down the address listed in the article. A tall office building near downtown, sleek and intimidating. Emma swallowed hard. She wasn't used to the world of glass towers and polished floors. Her life had always been measured in small, comforting steps. Shelving books, brewing coffee, helping her brother with homework. But this was a world she had never dared enter. By late afternoon, she stood in front of the building, staring up at its reflective windows. The city buzzed around her, oblivious to the small, fragile threads of her personal history unraveling at the base of the skyscraper. Emma took a deep breath, clutching the letter as if it were a lifeline, and stepped inside. The lobby was cavernous, gleaming marble floors and glass panels stretching toward the ceiling. A receptionist looked up from behind a polished desk. "Can I help you?" she asked, her tone polite but guarded. "Yes," Emma said, her voice firmer than she felt. "I'm here to see Michael Anderson." The receptionist's eyes flickered to her computer screen. "Do you have an appointment?" Emma shook her head. "No, but it's important. I believe he knew my mother, Sarah Miller." The words hung in the air like fragile glass. The receptionist paused, then picked up the phone and whispered something. A moment later, she gestured toward the elevators. "Mr. Anderson will see you. Please wait on the bench." Emma's knees almost gave way. She sat down, her hands clutching the letter as her mind spun. Every story she had built in her head about what this man might be like shattered and reformed in fragments. Would he recognize her? Would he deny her? Would he even want to meet her? Minutes stretched into an eternity before a tall man emerged from the elevator bank. Michael Anderson, the man in the photograph. His presence was commanding yet calm, the kind of presence that filled a room without needing to raise his voice. When his eyes met hers, there was a flicker of recognition, a subtle catch of breath that mirrored her own. "Emma," he said softly, almost reverently. Emma blinked, her voice caught in her throat. You know my name." Michael took a step closer, his eyes searching hers as though she held the missing pieces of a puzzle he had been trying to complete for decades. "Your mother, Sarah. She was everything I lost. Everything I didn't realize I needed until it was too late. And now you." Emma felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes. I don't understand. Why now? Why after all these years?" He gestured toward a quiet office nearby, and she followed, every step heavy with anticipation and fear. He sat across from her, finally close enough that she could see the faint lines of grief etched into his face. "I was young and foolish," he began, his voice low and hesitant. "I loved your mother, but my family, they didn't approve. I left, thinking I could come back once I had everything I thought I needed. But by the time I realized my mistake, she was gone. And I never knew about you." Emma's heart twisted in her chest. All those years of wondering, of imagining what her father might be like, had led to this. A man who carried regret like a second skin, who had lost her mother but not the memory of her. "So, you're my father," she whispered, her voice barely audible. He nodded slowly. "Yes, I searched for her for years. I searched for you, and when I finally found traces, all I could do was wait, hoping you might somehow find me." The room was silent except for the faint hum of the air conditioning. Emma's mind swirled with emotions. Anger at his absence, sorrow for the years lost, but also a fragile spark of hope, fragile enough to light a small fire in her chest. You didn't even know I existed," she said, voice trembling. "How can you expect me to just—" "I don't expect anything," he interrupted gently. "I only want the chance to make things right, in whatever way I can. Even if it's just sitting here, listening, letting you decide if you even want a father." Emma swallowed hard. She had imagined confrontations like this 1,000 times, in her apartment, in the quiet of the bookstore at night, in whispers to herself when no one could hear. But the reality, this man, this stranger, this man who was supposed to be her father, was heavier, richer, more complex than she had anticipated. She thought of her mother, the warmth of her hands, the softness in her voice. I want to know him," she admitted finally, her voice catching. "I want to know you, but it's going to take time. I can't just forget 25 years." Michael reached across the desk, hesitating, and lightly touched her hand, careful not to overwhelm her. "I don't want you to forget," he said. "I just want to be here now, if you'll let me." Emma felt a swell of something she hadn't felt in years, relief, perhaps, or the faintest whisper of belonging. She nodded slowly. "Okay," she said softly. The next few hours passed in a delicate dance of conversation. They spoke of her mother, of memories Michael had kept locked away, of photographs and letters he had saved. Emma shared stories of her childhood, her fatherless years, the small victories and disappointments of life. Michael listened, never interrupting, letting her words land where they needed to. By evening, Emma stepped out of the building, the city lights twinkling like distant stars reflected in puddles along the sidewalks. Her world felt lighter, though it was only the first step of many. She clutched the letter to her chest once more, a reminder that the past had finally reached out to meet her present. And for the first time in years, she allowed herself to hope. The morning sunlight spilled into the small apartment where Emma lived, warming the hardwood floors and casting a golden hue over the stacks of books that lined the walls. Emma sat at the small kitchen table, sipping her coffee slowly, the letter from Michael Anderson still lying beside her laptop. She had spent the night replaying the conversation from the day before over and over in her mind, examining every pause, every glance, every word he had spoken. Michael had been nothing like she had imagined. He wasn't cold, distant, or arrogant. Instead, there was a softness in his eyes, a kind of vulnerability that spoke of decades of regret and longing. And yet, she couldn't ignore the years he had been absent, the years she had grown up without him. The anger lingered, like a bitter undertone in her otherwise cautious hope. Noah bounded into the kitchen, dragging his backpack behind him. "Emma, did you forget breakfast again?" he teased, though his voice carried a hint of concern. He had been sensing a change in her ever since she had returned from the building downtown, a kind of nervous energy she couldn't hide. Emma forced a small smile. "Not today, kiddo. We'll eat later, I promise." She watched him leave for school, his laughter echoing down the hall, and then turned back to the letter. Her hand brushed over the delicate paper as though it were a fragile bridge connecting her to a past she had almost forgotten. By mid-morning, she found herself walking back to Willow and Ivy, her thoughts still tangled with memories of her mother and the unexpected reunion with Michael. The bookstore had been quiet in her absence, and she felt a strange comfort in the familiar routine. Shelving books, straightening displays, the quiet murmur of pages being turned. But her mind kept drifting back to the letter, to Michael, to the possibility of having a father after all these years. When she arrived, she noticed a small envelope slipped under the door, addressed to her in Michael's handwriting. She tore it open eagerly. Inside was a note. "Emma, if you're willing, I'd like to visit. No expectations. Just a conversation, perhaps a walk in the park where your mother loved to spend time." Michael. Her pulse quickened. This was real. This was happening. She set the note aside and continued her work, though she found herself distracted, glancing at the clock more often than she should have. By late afternoon, the city was bathed in a warm amber glow. Emma stepped out of the bookstore and waited on the curb, nerves twisting in her stomach. When Michael arrived, stepping out of a sleek black car with a gentle smile, she felt a strange mix of excitement and apprehension. "Emma," he said softly, almost reverently as he approached. He looked different outside the glass towers, more human somehow, less distant and untouchable. "Hi," she replied, her voice catching slightly. She noticed the way his eyes softened when he smiled, and for a moment, she felt herself remembering her mother, the warmth of her presence, the gentleness she had carried in her touch. They walked in silence for a few blocks, the city noise fading as they turned down a quieter street lined with elm trees. The air was crisp, filled with the scent of fall leaves and faint hints of coffee from nearby cafes. The silence wasn't uncomfortable. It was a shared space, a place where words were unnecessary until they were ready. Finally, Michael spoke. "I want to tell you everything," he said. "I know I have no right to expect forgiveness, but I need you to know why I left, why I couldn't be there." Emma nodded, her hands clasped in front of her. I want to hear it, she admitted softly. I need to understand. He took a deep breath, his eyes distant as he recalled memories long buried. Your mother and we met when I was barely out of college. I was ambitious, foolish, thinking I could conquer the world. She was everything I wasn't. Gentle, patient, kind. She loved without expectation. And he paused, swallowing hard. I ran. I left, chasing a dream I thought would make everything right, but it never did. By the time I realized my mistake, she was gone. And I never knew about you until recently. Emma felt a lump in her throat. She had imagined this conversation countless times, rehearsed what she would say, but the reality of hearing her father's confession, the weight of his words, made her knees ache. You didn't know? She whispered. You didn't know I existed? No, he said simply, his voice raw with emotion. I didn't, and that knowledge, the knowledge of what I lost, has haunted me every day since. I wanted to be brave, to fix things, but I was weak. I thought I could return, and somehow it would all be okay. But life doesn't wait for anyone. Emma felt a tear slip down her cheek. I forgave her, she said softly. But you were gone. And I grew up thinking maybe people just leave. Maybe I don't matter. Michael stopped walking and turned to face her fully, his hand brushing gently against hers. Emma, you matter more than I ever realized. I was wrong, and I can't take back the years I lost, but I can be here now. If you'll let me. They continued walking, the crisp autumn air wrapping around them, carrying the scent of change and possibility. As they approached the park, Emma recognized it immediately. The same park her mother had loved, where she had spent afternoons teaching Emma how to climb trees and skipping stones across the pond. Memories surged forward, vivid and bittersweet. And for the first time in years, Emma felt her heart opening to the possibility of family. They sat on a bench overlooking the pond, the sunlight glinting off the water like scattered diamonds. Michael reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small, worn photograph. It was of her mother, smiling at him, holding a tiny version of Emma in her arms. She never stopped talking about you, he said softly. Even when I was gone, she kept your memory alive. Emma's tears fell freely now. I didn't know, she whispered. I didn't know any of this. You can know now, he said gently. And I want to be part of your life if you'll let me. They spoke for hours, sharing stories, memories, laughter, and tears. Emma learned things about her mother she had never known, and Michael learned about the young woman she had become. Strong, compassionate, and unafraid to face life head-on. By evening, they stood together at the edge of the pond, watching the sun dip below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of pink and gold. For the first time in years, Emma felt a sense of completeness, a fragile but undeniable connection to the family she had always longed for. Michael handed her a small envelope. Something for you, he said softly. Inside was a scholarship offer in her name, honoring her mother's legacy, and a deed to the house where Emma had grown up with her grandmother. An offer to secure a home and stability she had always wanted but never thought she could have. This isn't charity, he said. It's family, and I want you to have what's rightfully yours, without hesitation or expectation. Emma clutched the papers to her chest, tears streaming down her face, and looked up at him. Thank you for coming back, she said simply. Michael smiled, a mixture of relief and hope in his expression. No, he said softly. Thank you for letting me. As they walked back toward the city streets, the air between them felt lighter, filled with unspoken promises and the first tentative steps toward healing. Emma knew the journey ahead would not be without challenges, but for the first time, she allowed herself to imagine a life where family wasn't a dream, but a living, breathing reality. The next morning, the city streets buzzed with the usual rhythm of life, horns honking, coffee cups clinking, and the chatter of pedestrians carrying on oblivious to the quiet, delicate threads of a reunion that had begun to unfold. Emma sat in her apartment, sipping her coffee, staring at the envelope Michael had left the day before. The scholarship, The deed, the small gestures. They were all meaningful, yet she felt a twinge of unease. She wanted to believe in him, wanted to trust that the father she had finally found could make up for 25 lost years. But the past was a shadow that refused to fade. Noah bounced into the apartment, backpack slung carelessly over one shoulder. "Emma, are we really doing this?" he asked, his wide eyes filled with curiosity. "Doing what?" she replied, masking her nervousness. "Meeting him again." "Michael Anderson," Noah said, as though the name alone carried weight. "You said yesterday you'd meet him. Are you sure?" Emma looked at her brother, the youngest of her small family, and saw in him the same mixture of hope and trepidation that gnawed at her own heart. "Yes," she said finally. "I think it's time." By late morning, she arrived at the cafe where they had agreed to meet. Michael was already there, sitting at a corner table by the window. When he saw her, a small, tentative smile spread across his face. He stood as she approached, his hand reaching out in greeting, but she hesitated, letting seconds stretch into eternity. "Emma," he said softly, voice filled with quiet anticipation. "I know yesterday was a lot, and I don't want to rush anything. He paused, as if weighing each word carefully. "I want you to see that I'm here. I'm not leaving again." Emma swallowed hard, emotions threatening to spill over. "I want to believe that," she whispered. "I really do. But it's hard to forget 25 years. Michael nodded, understanding etched into every line of his face. "I know, and I don't expect you to. I only want a chance to be part of your life now. That's all I've ever wanted." They sat together, the hum of the cafe fading into the background. Michael spoke of his own regrets, of the loneliness he had carried, the mistakes he had made chasing ambition, and the lessons life had cruelly taught him. Emma shared stories of her childhood, both joyous and painful. The moments of triumph she had savored alone, the nights she had cried herself to sleep wishing for a father's presence. Then came the harder conversations. Michael asked about her mother, about the last days he had missed, and Emma told him everything she could remember, her voice shaking at times. He listened intently, never interrupting, letting her words fill the space between them. After a long pause, Michael leaned forward, his hands folded on the table. "Emma, I know there's so much I can't give back. I know I missed years I can never reclaim. But I want to try. I want to be here for you and Noah. I want to be someone you can rely on, not just a stranger from your mother's past." Tears welled in Emma's eyes, the pain of absence and the longing for family converging into a single, overwhelming wave. She looked at him, really looked at him, and saw not just the man who had abandoned her mother, but the man who had loved her deeply, who carried the weight of that love and that loss for decades. I need time," she admitted. "I need to see that you mean it, that you won't leave again." Michael nodded solemnly. "I understand. I'll wait as long as it takes." Over the next few weeks, they met in quiet places, parks, cafes, small museums where her mother had loved to wander. Each meeting was a careful negotiation of trust, a weaving together of fragments of life that had been torn apart. Emma began to see the man behind the regrets, the father she had never known but always hoped for. One evening, Michael invited her to a small gathering at his office building, a modest affair to introduce her to people who had known her mother. The room was warm, filled with photographs, memories, and laughter. People shared stories of Sarah Miller, the kindness she had shown to strangers, the love she had carried for her family, the quiet strength that had left a mark on everyone who knew her. Emma listened, tears slipping freely down her cheeks, realizing how deeply her mother had touched lives she had never imagined. Michael stood beside her, a steady presence, letting her take in the stories, offering a hand when she needed support. For the first time, Emma felt the weight of loss transform into something gentle, something that could grow into connection. After the gathering, they walked together through the city streets, the night air crisp with autumn's approach. Michael stopped at a small bridge overlooking the river, the water reflecting the glow of the streetlights. "Emma," he said softly, "I know there will be days when this feels overwhelming, when the past seems too heavy. But I promise you, I'm not going anywhere. We'll face it together. I want to be part of your life in every way I can. Emma felt a warmth in her chest, a fragile but undeniable hope taking root. I want that too, she whispered. I want to try, and I want to see that family isn't just about being born together. It's about being there for each other, even when it's hard. They stood there in silence for a moment, letting the quiet intimacy of the river, the city lights, and the night wrap around them. The bridge had witnessed many stories, but tonight it bore witness to a beginning. One that was tentative, yet full of promise. Over the next month, Emma and Michael continued to build their relationship slowly. He helped with small things, fixing the leaky faucet at her grandmother's house, attending parent-teacher meetings with Noah, helping with the bookstore renovations. And with each passing day, Emma began to see him not as the man who had abandoned her mother, but as the man who had returned, ready to embrace the family he had lost. One afternoon, while sorting through old photographs in the bookstore, Emma came across a picture of herself as a child, her mother's arms wrapped around her, and a familiar shadow of longing in her eyes. She realized that all this time, she had carried pieces of her mother in her heart, and now, Michael's presence was not replacing that, but adding to it, filling the spaces she had once thought empty. The turning point came one evening when Michael cooked dinner at Emma's apartment. A small, simple meal, yet filled with laughter and conversation. Noah watched in awe as the two of them joked and teased, a family forming in real time, fragile but undeniable. Emma felt a sense of peace she hadn't known since childhood, a quiet assurance that, while the past could never be changed, the future was still theirs to shape together. As the night wound down, Michael handed Emma a small, folded piece of paper. She opened it to find a simple invitation. A weekend retreat at a family cabin he had inherited, a place filled with memories of her mother, meant for them to spend time together, reconnecting and building new memories. Emma looked up at him, eyes shimmering. "You really think this is for us?" she asked. Michael smiled softly. "I think it's for you, for Noah, and for me, for all of us, to start the family we've been missing." Emma nodded, a single tear escaping down her cheek. "Then let's go," she said. "Let's start." That night, as she lay in bed, Emma reflected on the past few weeks. She had faced fear, uncertainty, and the ache of decades-long absence. But she had also discovered love, hope, and the possibility of family. The wounds of the past were still there, but they no longer defined her. Instead, they guided her toward a future she could finally embrace. And for the first time in years, she felt whole. The weekend arrived with a crisp, golden morning that carried the faint scent of pine and earth. Emma loaded the last of her things into her car, Noah bouncing in the back seat with boundless excitement, his backpack spilling over with snacks and books. The letter from Michael, the scholarship papers, and the deed to her grandmother's house sat neatly tucked in her bag, tangible reminders of a past she could finally embrace rather than fear. Michael met them at the edge of the cabin's driveway, a modest but warm wooden structure nestled among towering evergreens. He waved, his face lighting up when he saw them. The moment Emma stepped out of the car, she felt an unfamiliar but comforting sense of belonging. For the first time, her world, the one she had built slowly, cautiously, over years of small victories, was expanding to include someone who had been absent for far too long. "Ready?" Michael asked, smiling softly. Emma nodded, her hand brushing against his briefly. "As ready as I'll ever be." Noah bolted ahead, exploring the cabin's surroundings with uncontainable energy, while Emma and Michael followed more slowly, taking in the quiet beauty of the forest around them. The air was crisp, and the sound of leaves crunching underfoot felt like music, grounding Emma in a moment that was hers to claim. Once inside the cabin, they were greeted by warmth, both literal and emotional. A fireplace crackled softly in the living room, and photographs lined the walls. Landscapes of mountains and lakes, smiling families, and a few faded images of Sarah Miller. Emma ran her fingers over the pictures, her chest tightening with nostalgia and love. Michael handed her a small box. "I thought we could start somewhere familiar," he said softly. Inside was a collection of letters and photographs from Sarah, carefully preserved. Emma traced the handwriting, tears filling her eyes as memories of her mother came alive with each line, each photo. "I can't believe this is real," she whispered. You saved all of this?" "I kept it for you," he said gently. "Even when I didn't know you existed. I wanted to protect what was yours, what belonged to your mother." The day unfolded slowly, intentionally, as if time itself had decided to honor the reunion. They cooked together in the small kitchen, laughter spilling over the clatter of pots and pans. Noah helped Michael chop vegetables, both of them laughing at small mistakes and shared jokes. Emma watched, her heart swelling with a sense of completeness she had never thought possible. By afternoon, they ventured down to the small pond behind the cabin, where Emma's mother had spent countless hours sketching and reading. Emma sat on a fallen log, tossing pebbles into the water, watching the ripples spread outward. Michael joined her, sitting silently for a few moments before speaking. "Your mother, she would have loved this," he said softly. "She would have been so proud of you, of the person you've become." Emma's throat tightened. I wish she could have been here with us," she admitted. "But I feel her here too in a way I never did before. Through you, through Noah, through all of this." Michael reached out and gently touched her shoulder. "And that's what she wanted most. For you to have love, family, and a life that's whole. She would have been happy knowing we're finally here." As the sun dipped low, painting the sky in shades of amber and rose, they returned to the cabin, where Michael suggested they share stories about Sarah, the memories he had kept safe, and the little anecdotes that revealed her spirit and strength. Emma laughed through tears, learning things about her mother that deepened the connection she had always longed for. Later that evening, as they sat by the fireplace, Michael handed Emma a small, folded paper. It was an invitation from the Michael Anderson Foundation, a chance for Emma to help lead a new initiative in honor of her mother, supporting children who had lost parents. "This is yours," he said softly. "You deserve to make a difference, just like she did." Emma looked at him, overwhelmed by the gesture. I don't know what to say," she whispered. "Then just say yes," he replied, his voice gentle but firm. "Say yes to family. Say yes to the future." She nodded, tears streaming freely now. "Yes," she said, and in that simple word, so much was resolved: grief, longing, hope, and the promise of tomorrow. The night ended with them stepping outside onto the cabin's porch, looking up at a sky splashed with stars. Noah ran ahead, chasing fireflies, laughing in pure delight. Emma and Michael watched, shoulder to shoulder, their hearts light for the first time in years. "Do you think she's watching?" Emma asked quietly, a wistful smile on her lips. Michael nodded, his gaze gentle. "I know she is, and I think she's proud. She always knew you'd find your way back to family." Emma took a deep breath, the cool night air filling her lungs. The past would always be a part of her, but now it was no longer a burden. It was a foundation, a place from which she could build, grow, and love without fear. As they returned inside, Emma felt the warmth of the cabin envelope her, the quiet hum of life blending with the crackle of the fire and the soft laughter of her brother. Michael's presence was steady, comforting, a promise that family was no longer something she had to imagine. That night, as Emma lay in bed, she reflected on the journey she had taken. From the discovery of the letter to the cautious first meeting, to the tentative steps toward trust, and now to a place where hope and love were no longer fragile but real. She felt her mother's spirit beside her, felt Noah's laughter, and felt Michael's hand on hers, steady and warm. For the first time in her life, Emma allowed herself to imagine a future that was not just about surviving, but thriving. Family wasn't perfect, and it would take time to fully heal, but it was present, tangible, and alive. She whispered into the quiet room, a promise to herself and to the mother she had lost. "We'll make it, together." Outside, the stars twinkled like distant fires, tiny points of light in a vast universe. Emma watched them, feeling a profound sense of peace. Sometimes, she realized, Life takes the long way to bring people together. But when it does, the reunion is worth every lost year, every tear, every moment of longing. The weekend passed in gentle rhythms of laughter, conversation, and quiet reflection. Emma and Michael planted a small garden near the cabin, a living tribute to Sarah, a symbol of growth, love, and continuity. They spent time with Noah, teaching him how to fish, how to climb trees safely, and how to see family as both present and enduring. By the time Sunday evening rolled around, Emma felt a sense of wholeness she had never known. The scholarship, the house, the connection to her father, all tangible reminders that life, even when broken, could be rebuilt with care, patience, and love. As she packed the car to return to the city, Emma turned to Michael. "Thank you," she said softly, "for everything, for coming back, for being here, for giving us a chance at family." Michael smiled, his eyes glinting with quiet joy. "No, thank you," he replied, "for letting me in, for trusting me, and for allowing all of this to happen." Noah climbed into the back seat, chattering about the fish he caught and the games they had played. Emma looked at him, then at Michael, and felt a profound sense of completeness. The wounds of the past were still there, faint scars beneath the surface, but they no longer defined her. Instead, they were reminders of the resilience of love and the power of family. As the car drove away from the cabin, the sun set behind the mountains, casting the world in a warm, golden glow. Emma looked out the window, a smile spreading across her face. She had found her father, rediscovered the essence of her mother, and embraced a future filled with hope, love, and the quiet certainty that she was not alone. Sometimes, she realized, the missing pieces of the heart take time to find, but when they do, they fit perfectly, and the world feels right again. And for Emma, that feeling had finally arrived.